Many game developers have made mistakes with their games, especially live service ones. But the Helldivers 2 situation is different. Recently, Helldivers 2 players became very upset. They feel Arrowhead Studios let them down. Now, these players want the game to fail. I understand how they feel. I usually try to stay neutral about these things. I try to look at things from all sides. I want my opinions to be fair and my feedback helpful. But with Helldivers 2, I'm really frustrated. The game started so well. It was one of the best new games in a long time. People all over the world loved it, in about 180 countries. But with Helldivers 2, they keep messing up. It should have been a year of celebrating success. Instead, we're here asking, what went wrong? Can it be fixed? I'm not sure. Despite what some game writers say, having 450,000 people playing at once on Steam and millions logging in daily wasn't going to last. Helldivers 2 is a game where you mostly shoot lots of enemies over and over. That kind of game usually doesn't keep huge numbers of players for long. Now, Helldivers 2 will be lucky to keep the players it has left. A post on Reddit Helldivers 2 days ago said, "Let the bots advance, let Super Earth burn." It showed a picture of the automatons nearly at Super Earth, which would end the game. This was about the new update, Escalation of Freedom. The update was adding new weapons, a new warbond, new areas, new enemies, new missions, harder difficulties, and a big enemy base. It was the first big update since the game's release, but players are upset because the update changed how strong different weapons are. This made many players angry. A big issue was damage reductions to the most popular weapons, including the flamethrower. This happened before in an earlier update, which made players very angry. The developers said they wanted to stop everyone using the same weapons. Players didn't like these changes. The person in charge of balancing weapons at that time went on Reddit and made fun of upset fans. They even said, "I am feeding the rage a little bit for my own entertainment here." The company said sorry for this, and the developer deleted their account. That developer doesn't work on the game now, but the game still follows the same ideas about weapon balance. This might be because when the game first came out, many players didn't like it when others used only the best weapons. They wanted to play for fun and use whatever weapons they liked. They didn't want Helldivers 2 to become a game where everyone tries super hard to win, like many other online games. This game is about shooting lots of enemies. It's a power fantasy mixed with scary survival. You're a Helldiver, someone who kills a lot in a world that's just as deadly. But when you see most players using the same weapons, maybe it's not because those weapons are too strong. Maybe it's because all the other weapons are too weak. Think about Helldivers 2 like this. It's mostly the same game everyone's been playing. You drop onto the same planets, fight the same enemies, and do the same jobs. They've added some new stuff, but not much has changed. The big difference is that your weapons keep feeling weaker. This isn't just about making weapons balanced. In a game like Helldivers 2, it's more important. The game is about feeling powerful while facing tough enemies. When your weapons feel weaker, it changes how the whole game feels. Players aren't just upset about weapon changes. They're upset because the game they enjoyed is starting to feel less fun. Every time they play, their favorite weapons seem less effective. This makes the game feel harder, but not in a good way. So players aren't just angry about balance. They feel like the game they loved is slowly becoming less enjoyable to play. The enemies have gotten stronger, but the weapons feel weaker. So from the player's view, the fun part of the game is becoming less fun. That's the big problem. The game makers aren't thinking about how the game feels to play. They're looking at numbers on a spreadsheet instead. They're not considering why players like certain weapons. For example, the railgun. It's one of the coolest weapon ideas in video games. Everyone loves railguns. Or the arc launcher, which shoots lightning. These weapons are popular because they're awesome, not just because they're strong. The game makers aren't using common sense about why players choose certain weapons. They're not thinking about how fun the weapons are to use. Instead, they're just looking at data and trying to make everything equal. But that's not what makes a game like this fun. You're right. People are using weapons like railguns, arc launchers, and flamethrowers because they're cool and fun. These weapons aren't too strong. They're just more interesting than the others. The game's strength is having these awesome weapons. When players choose a weapon, they're often thinking, what looks coolest, not just what's strongest. Most players aren't trying to use the best weapon. They want to use the coolest one. They want to feel powerful and have fun. Sidearms and basic guns are in the game, but that's not what gets people excited. The problem isn't that some weapons are too good. It's that many weapons aren't interesting enough. Instead of making the fun weapons weaker, they should make the boring weapons more exciting. The game makers seem to be missing this point. They're trying to balance everything, but they're forgetting why people play this kind of game in the first place, to feel awesome while fighting aliens. The game's big strength is how cool and cinematic it looks during big fights. That's what makes it special. The game makers seem to have forgotten this. They used to be loved because they understood what players wanted. They seemed connected to the players. But now, that connection seems lost. You're admitting you were wrong before. You pushed back against other players who complained. Now you see they had a point. The game is losing what made it great, the feeling of being powerful and looking awesome while fighting. The developers are focusing on numbers and balance instead of what makes the game fun to play. They've lost touch with why people love the game in the first place. It's not just about making weapons equal. It's about making players feel cool and powerful in a tough world. That's what made the game stand out, and that's what they're forgetting. The balance changes weren't a one-time thing. It's clear now that the developers don't understand what players want. The mech, which should be fun and powerful, now feels bad to use. Rocket launchers don't work well anymore because you can't aim them up close. Other weapons are less fun too. The game is becoming less enjoyable overall. When a game stops being fun, what's left? Not much. Arrowhead Studios has lost the trust of their players. This trust was a big part of why the game was popular. They used to talk to players all the time. Johan, one of the developers, was always on Twitter talking to fans, listening to feedback, and giving updates. They worked hard to make sure lots of people could play the game. But now, by not listening to players and making changes that make the game less fun, they've lost that trust. The clear communication that made players love them is gone. They've lost touch with what made their game special and what made players like them as a company. It's amazing how things have changed. In the tough weeks after the game launched, players were really understanding. They were okay with getting disconnected often. They forgave the game for not being able to handle so many players. But as time went on, things got worse. The developers stopped listening to what players were saying. They didn't act on feedback from the community. The way they talked to players kept disappointing everyone. It's hard to believe how much things have changed. The goodwill from players at the start is gone now. Players were patient at first, even with big problems. They trusted the developers to fix things and make the game better. Now, that trust is broken. The developers aren't fixing the things players care about. They're not communicating well. It's a big change from how things were at the start. Seeing how things have gotten worse is shocking. The game went from having very forgiving fans to having many upset players. It's a big shift in a short time. The change in this game's situation is really dramatic. It started as a huge success that everyone loved. People saw it as a game for everyone. Players praised it for fair pricing. It became a cultural phenomenon. But now things have flipped completely. The game feels like it's for no one. Reddit and Discord mods are arguing with concerned fans. Developers are ignoring player feedback, even teasing players. Sony blocked the game in many countries. There are bans for using angry emotes on certain art in Discord. The studio has gone from being celebrated to being criticized. They're starting to act like the kind of game company that players usually complain about. This is a big fall. The game went from being a surprise hit at the start of the year to losing player trust. The goodwill they had at the beginning is disappearing fast. It's a lesson in how quickly things can change. Even with a great start, poor decisions and not listening to players can ruin a game's reputation very quickly. I'll be honest, I didn't expect Diablo 4 and Helldivers 2 to switch places like this in 2024. It's surprising. When you stop listening to your players, it causes problems. Look at the recent update and weapon changes. They made fire weapons weaker, then released a fire-themed battle pass. Players might think, why buy this if fire is weak now? Or worse, they might think the developers weakened fire on purpose to make people buy the new stuff. The visual changes are a big issue too. The flamethrower used to look amazing, leaving fire trails and spraying realistically. Now it's weaker and looks cheaper, with less impressive effects. Helldivers 2 became popular partly because the fights looked so cinematic. It was part of what made the game special. Removing that is a big mistake. From a player's view, or even someone just watching, these changes look bad. The game is losing what made it unique and exciting. It seems like the developers are making choices that go against what made the game popular in the first place. At this point, Helldivers 2 isn't getting better. It's just getting worse over the last 3 to 4 months. It's losing both casual players and its core fans. Shams, the new CEO of Arrowhead Studios, recently responded to bad player reviews on Steam. He tweeted, getting humbled on Reddit as usual when players showed the low review scores. On Discord, he said something like, the tricky part for us is that some people complain very loudly, while a lot of you are playing the game and enjoying it. We're not sure what to think. This response shows they're not really listening to players. They seem to think only a few loud people are unhappy, while most players are fine. But the falling review scores and player numbers show that's not true. The CEO's comments make it look like they don't understand or care about the real problems. Instead of fixing things, they're dismissing player concerns. This attitude is likely to make players even more frustrated and could hurt the game even more. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to this channel.